Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Project Sanity. I am one of many hosts. My name is Brandon Sutton. Thank you for joining us here, whether you're joining us on the Project Sanity YouTube channel or the Benjamin Dixon Show YouTube channel. Before we get started, why don't you like and subscribe to the channel, whichever one you're on, or both, if you're not already subscribed. See, I did it. I plugged it. I remembered this time.
You
Okay?
sucked. You were terrible.
I was fine. Anyway, whatever. Leave me alone. No one's watching it, so it doesn't make a difference. Tonight, we want to have a discussion with you about this dangerous trend I seem to be noticing, where people perform progressive politics in the light of day, and then in the dark of night, like thieves, steal. And I'm talking about Cory Booker. And I know people were taken by his rousing cross-examination, critique, whatever you want to call it, at the hearings of Jeff Sessions and Tillerson and all these other. And don't get me wrong, he did a great job compared to people like Marco Rubio. But that's what we call damning with faint praise, because at least he didn't go off on a tangent about Russia and Russian conspiracy theories. And while it's fine, he did have this. In case you haven't realized yet, him and 13 other him along with 12 other Democratic senators, in the dark of night, decided to vote against a bill that would export. It was the dark of night. Don't laugh. It was the dark of night. Decide to vote against a bill that would allow Americans to import in Canadian drugs for a cheaper price. Because as we know, we are not allowed to negotiate drug prices. The government is not allowed to negotiate drug prices with drug companies, because big pharmaceutical companies bribe our politicians. One of those politicians is, of course, Cory Booker. What do you guys think of this? Before I go in, please.
Richard, I'll let you have first crack at it. Right. Well, I mean, so I'm trying to think of how to phrase this on a family-friendly channel like Ben's. I wish nothing. Yeah, go ahead, Richard, because I can't do it without swearing.
Do I have to do it?
Do you have to what? Not swear? Yeah, I thought that was
no. I meant, like, do I have to explain the problem with this?
No, can you do it without cussing?
I can. The problem is very simply this, and I said this yesterday too. What we have here is a tendency amongst Democratic operatives, Democratic elites, people who are not really affected very much by these issues, to go out into the public and perform progressive things. That, like, we have Cory Booker standing up to the monster that is Jeff Sessions. And don't get me wrong, Jeff Sessions is a monster. Like, by all accounts, his history on civil rights, his history on women's rights, his history on everything, as in Alabama, he was too racist to be a judge under Reagan. You know how racist that is? Because
openly
think about
racist.
That.
You got to be really openly racist.
You have to be openly racist. That'd be the case. And this, so, like, it doesn't take a lot of courage to stand up to this, and especially in the light of day, where you're going to get a lot of political, capital for it. But then, not even a full day later, he's voting against a drug bill that would benefit the poorest Americans. Like what are we talking? Like what is going on?
Here's the thing, though, about that, and this is, and thank you for that, because now I'm less angry about it. But here's the thing: when we say performing progressive acts in the light of day, if someone does something in their life that's progressive, that doesn't necessarily make them a progressive. I mean, let's be real. Ted Cruz voted for this bill to allow, importation of drugs from Canada, his homeland. But still, it doesn't necessarily make you a progressive to do something progressive where everybody can watch. It's just political points there. But at the heart of things, he's in the pocket of financial interest, because they donated something like $300 some odd thousand to his campaign.
I think the number is $275,000 they donated to Cory Booker. He of the top 10 people to take money from the pharmaceutical companies, of the 13 people, Democrats who switched sides to vote against this bill, of the 7 of them are in the top 10 of people who have taken money from pharmaceutical companies. So,
including my own senators. Well, one of them, I believe it was Maria Cantwell, who should be expecting a phone call from me in the near future, because this is garbage. But I mean, honestly, that's what politicians do, right? And this is why we so desperately need money out of politics, because it is literally, it's easy to stand up against something that is going to affect you personally. Jeff Sessions, the out-and-out racist, misogynist, homophobic piece of human garbage that he is his actions are going to hurt regular everyday people. They're going to hurt people like Cory Booker. They're going to hurt people like Maria Cantwell. They're going to hurt people like the rest of those Democrats who flipped sides and voted no against this bill. But what's not going to hurt them is high drug prices. Do you think they're like, I mean, they've got the best healthcare in the world because they're senators. I mean, let's be realistic about it.
I mean, okay, so this drug, I don't know if I necessarily agree. I think this drug bill issue right here is not too nuanced for people to understand. I think a lot of people are angry about this, but I have seen this response on Twitter, and I can understand this response. Well, how could you be criticizing Cory Booker right now and Representative John Lewis after they stood up to Jeff Sessions, even when they're doing this sort of thing in the light of day? And what it becomes is that there really is politicians are not going to do anything without an incentive. Right. And there is simply no incentive from the non-monetary standpoint. Like there's no incentive, there's no pressure from the public up until after it happens, because this flies under the radar to vote against this bill. Where there is pressure or vote in favor of this bill, where there is pressure coming for when it's this bill, is from big pharma. There's pressure coming from there. There is public pressure, and it's an easy way to score points to go up against Jeff Sessions, and that is the issue with Jeff Sessions. And
he did that half-assed. Okay, thank you. Stupid about. From the
Is your mic audio on, Richard?
You guys could hear me, but nobody else could.
Right. Repeat that information real quick.
Yeah, what I was saying was to clear up some information regarding what the pressure from the pharmaceutical lobby regarding Washington senators. The senator who had received $254,649 was Patty Murray, not Maria Cantwell. But I guess we also heard that Maria Cantwell had received about $25,000, so significantly less. But it is especially important for her on this vote because she is up in 2018, which is when progressives plan on making some moves. But I'll let you guys continue your conversation.
But real quick with the amount that they made, they received in donations, right? I just want to put this in perspective of how much the average income in Washington is a year. Now, mind you, this is bloated by the fact that we have major companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, etc. But the median income in Washington state is about $51,000 a year. So Patty Murray received what an average Washingtonian would make in 5 years in donations. Whereas Maria Cantwell received what would take 6 months of hard work to get in Washington state. So, I mean, that's an issue. But I really want to talk about is what you heard on Twitter where people saying, how can you attack Cory Booker and John Lewis and all these other folks when they're fighting Jeff Sessions? Did you hear what Cory Booker had to say? Did you hear the Law and Order?
Cory Booker pushback of Jeff Sessions was moderate at best, but in a sea of Russia this, Russia that, in a sea of racist, of Klansmen and shields coming, it was a breath of fresh air. His questioning of Tillerson, the pick for Secretary of, I'm forgetting now,
State,
Secretary of State. State was, he engaged in a very substantive line of question in comparison to the other people there. But it comes down to
talk about what his actual rebuke of what he said in part of his cross exam of Jeff Sessions. Cory Booker said, and I quote, "I support law and order. I support my police officers, et cetera, et cetera." Let's talk about what law and order is. Law and order is dog whistle code. We've decried it in the past. We should decry it now. But here's how scary it is that somebody who even moderately rebuked a person up for a cabinet position is a breath of fresh air. How sickening is that when you have someone who's like, well, you know what, I don't like you in particular, but I'm still going to use your coded racist dog whistle language in my rebuke of you, and people are just going to eat it up. Like, I think it's scary where we're at right now with crap like that. I'll give you as Tillerson.
That's one of the things I just
still.
quickly, and I know Brandon wants to get in here. I just wanted to say is like that's one of the things that's really stuck out to me is how often, basically, the bar to clear is Trump. So if you're better than Trump, well, at least it's better than Trump, which is such a ridiculous. Like the bar was already pretty low for Congress, for our political system at large, but if Trump's the bar that everybody's going to have to clear from now on, and if they get close, that's going to be decent. That's devastating for the future of our politics. Go ahead.
Absolutely, and that's what's so problematic about this is that his rebuke of Jeff Sessions, his rebuke of Tillerson, his rebuke of Trump are going to act as shields when people come after him for this drug bill. They're gonna, his excuse was there were no safety precautions in the bill. There were very clearly safety precautions in this bill. I don't know what kind of drugs he thought we were going to export from Canada. Canada is not known for having an irresponsible drug industry, but but this thin veneer of progressivism, this big bad progressive talk is, ultimately Cory Booker is Obama light. He's very much Obama light insofar that he talks this big game. He makes these big performances. He speaks the right language, but it's such a thin veneer. And like Richard I just pointed out, it works because people have been conditioned by Democrats to accept that this is all that it takes. That even if they don't block, even when they don't block Sessions, even when they don't block Tillerson, even when they don't, they don't stop Trump from being elected, they don't defeat Trump, that it's okay because they tried. And
they're selling us the same thing Republicans sold their constituents with repealing the ACA for 6 years, and now they're actually confronted with the possibility of doing it, and they're completely flustered. They have no plan. They're unprepared. Then we had this whole Votorama trolling session that went actually both ways, really. Like the Democrats put Republicans out, and Republicans put Democrats out by pushing against the prescription, or pushing for the prescription drug thing, getting several Republican votes so that Democrats had to vote against it if they wanted to stop it. Putting Democrats out, just like the Democrats were putting the Republicans out for trying to strip away things like the various protections of the ACA.
Go ahead, Brandon.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is functionally. I mean, it's Cory Booker's activities are disgusting because we have this situation now where we have to actually question why he actually stood up to Jeff Sessions. Did he stand up to Jeff Sessions out of some moral obligation? Did he stand up to Jeff Sessions because he actually cares about the plight of African Americans, or he finds it repugnant what he did in the past? Or is he just standing up to Jeff Sessions simply because it provides a very good in the public for when people criticize him for being, in the pocket of Wall Street, in the pocket of pharma? And and ultimately, like I said before, it's very easy to stand up to Jeff Sessions. I know this is counterintuitive, but when you're talking about politics, it's very easy to stand up to monsters because ultimately no one is going to. It's not going to lose you any votes, really. It's not going to lose you any. Him standing up to Sessions is a very manipulative, very calculated move. But as we saw with the pharma vote, he is not willing to stand up to anyone who would actually lose him money. He's not willing to stand up for things that are not politically expedient. And so a question, okay, yes, you stand up to Tillerson, you stand up to Jeff Sessions, people where I would say 85% of the population can understand why Jeff Sessions is problematic. But are you going to stand up to Elaine Chao? No. Are you going to stand up to Betsy DeVos? No, absolutely not. We're not going to see this kind of resistance to Betsy DeVos. And it comes down to like Richard just said about one of these dangers of Trump's is that Trump is going to become the new standard bearer for what is bad.
Trump is the standard bearer for what's bad already. And that was by design with the Dems. The Dems are who made Trump the standard bearer. Where, well, if you're not as bad as Donald Trump, you must be okay. But if you're Donald Trump or further, I mean, you can't get much worse than Donald Trump. I'm sorry, but you can, especially politically, it's impossible.
But it's not.
We would have thought Donald Trump was impossible. Go ahead, Brandon.
It's not even that, though. It's not only if you are not Donald Trump, you're good. It's that if you stand in opposition to Donald Trump or in any real way, you are on the side of righteousness now. You now have this righteous cloak. Look at David Brock. David Brock came out, Now he's against Donald Trump. George W. Bush is against Donald Trump. The left is so willing to bring anyone in who to stand against Donald Trump that they're getting into bed with the enemy. And I hate that sound so.
We have been getting into bed with the enemy, and we've talked about this on the show before. We've been sleeping with the enemy since the 90s. We've been sleeping with the enemy since we went with Bill Clinton and his neo-Republican plans. We moved from the left to becoming the party of the neoliberal. We are no longer actual leftists. We are no longer the party of people who are invested in making the American citizens' lives better. It is absolutely. We spent so much time reaching out to Republicans that the left has become the new Republican Party. And speaking of Republicans, what was said earlier, this idea that if you just stay, if you try, right, that idea of the participation trophy. The thing is, the Democrats feel as long as you're civil, then you're the better person and you really win. Even if that means the people that voted you into office are being so routinely screwed that they don't sleep with their partner anymore. I mean, that's just what is happening to the everyday average American. Is we are so focused on civility and not at all focused on how do we take care of the people that are most in need, that they're willing to bend over and let George W. Bush walk right in.
Well, here's the thing: the everyday average American people are not so concerned with civility. That is civility as a byproduct of misrepresentation and as a form of prejudice and oppression is a hobgoblin, is a obsession of the elite. The elite Democrats, the elite Republicans.
But that's who the Democrats are. The Democrats are elite. They are not us.
But that's why they lost, because they misunderstood how civil everybody wanted them to be, and that's why Trump won. Because they're like, how can Trump in his vulgar language win the presidency? Like, and they put out all these awful ads like, think of the children, think of the children, think of the children, and it's like it becomes this down to this sort of cowardice. There's an old saying, cowards, cowards excuse their actions based on the rules and children. And that's what Democrats did. They revealed their cowardice because they were civil beyond belief, and because they viewed that as a virtue, while the rest of America does not view that kind of civility, does not view that kind of civility to be a virtue. Like, that kind of civility in the face of someone like Trump is not virtuous. I would even argue that kind of civility in the face of someone like Hillary Clinton was not a virtue for Bernie Sanders to engage in. But that's neither here nor there. The point is this: the Democrats miscalculated how much their civility also meant to their own voting base. They were, although I would say that they were not particularly civil to, especially not David Brock, were not particularly civil to their own voting base, but they overestimated how much language mattered. And they felt as though language was enough to get people to vote for them, and that people were too stupid to actually have felt the impact of their very bad economic policies. And this, I'll finish up and I'll let you go. It's like, and that reveals the fundamental flaw when it comes down to being quote unquote economically conservative and socially liberal. That might work well. That might work well and good in your elite bubble, but for the rest of America, those two things are at polar opposites. Because as we see with the repeal of the ACA, as we see with the cost of pharmaceutical drugs, as we see with the refusal to raise the minimum wage, the people who bear that burden of these conservative economic policies are the most oppressed people. And so when you tell people, "Oh yeah, your lives are getting better," look at all of the body positivity, look at all of the all of the ways in which the Democratic Party has brought American culture into the future in terms of language. Everyone's just looking around and going, I'm sorry, in language and gay marriage. Everyone's looking around and going, well, I can't even feed my family. It's like, I can't even feed my children. You're so focused on these lofty ideals of language and rhetoric and climate change and the EPA's funding and the FDA's funding. And those are great things. Don't get me wrong. But when you can't feed your kids, that socially liberal nonsense does not play well. Because no one likes to hear how life is getting better when they can look around and see that it's not.
Yeah, add on to that the whole "don't believe your lying eyes" thing, as far as what their politics is when they're speaking with their constituents. Like as we saw, as you mentioned with Cory Booker, or as I know how I feel about my senators. My senators did not give me any impression other than, supporting Hillary Clinton and so on and so forth, that they would do something like shoot down this prescription drug bill and then not already know that that's going to get pushback from their constituents and not have a statement already prepared. Like
one of her first tweets after that, I believe it was Patty Murray. One of her first tweets after that was, something about fighting for healthcare. I mean, you're gonna shoot down a bill about lowering drug costs and then tweet about you're gonna fight for healthcare. You're gonna champion healthcare. Get out of here with that garbage. But
Obamacare is not healthcare; it's mandatory health insurance.
They're not talking. It wasn't about Obamacare. It was not about Obamacare. It was about Planned Parenthood. So,
of course, of course it was.
Yes.
Planned Parenthood is a great thing, and I think we need to fund Planned Parenthood. But I want to talk about what you said specifically, because you were talking about that people show their cards by hiding behind women and children, essentially. That's the thing, though, is the left didn't realize that this election was about people's kids, was about the fact that I've talked to some Trump supporters back in Ohio and in Pennsylvania and in Michigan and places like that who said, guess what? I voted for the person that I thought would help fix my economic issues, regardless of whether or not they are wrong, which they are. He is not going to help you. It's going to get a whole lot worse. Though, then again, I think Hillary Clinton would be just as bad economically. There's this idea that, well, I voted for the person that's going to help me put food on the table and make sure my kids can survive, make sure my kids can go forward in life. We're the first generation to have a life expectancy lower than that of our parents, to have the expectancy of wealth accumulation lower than our parents. Mind you, I think wealth accumulation isn't a great thing, but everybody should have a place to live. These are things that should be happening, but we're not seeing. And Democrats have such a fundamental disconnect because they don't listen to the people that they actually claim to help. And that's why we have so many captive voters in the United States. Because of this two-party system, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You're stuck as a person of color between people that are going to economically screw you, but say, hey, you can't call that person a racial slur, and someone that's going to both call you the N-word and then take your food stamps out from underneath you. It is absolute. It's meant to keep people captive, and this is part of it angers me because people don't want to realize it. People are so happy living in this idyllic fantasy world that they have that Democrats, by some bloody metric, by the fact that they don't sit up here and actually yell at the person across from them and say, no, you can't do this. They're somehow so much better than the Republicans, even though the Republicans are the ones actually getting things done. As terrible as it might be, Democrats have to wake up and realize if we want people to vote for us, we have to fight for them. We have to go and actually do things. We cannot be the party of elitism. We cannot be the party of I speak better than you do, therefore I am right and you are wrong. They have to be the party of less BS ideals and more the party of getting food on the table for these kids.
But I mean, that's the thing. And see, the Democrats feel incredibly comfortable. And I think this is perhaps the disconnect here between the Democrats and their voters, the Democratic voting base. The Democrats feel incredibly comfortable with defining people's problems for them. The Democratic Party, as a party of rich people, feel very, very comfortable. As a party of largely rich, largely white people, feel very, very comfortable telling minorities and oppressed populations what their problems are, promising to fix them, and then never doing it. And I don't know if this exists because I exist on the left. I don't know how much of a disconnect, if that disconnect is the exact same. I can speak to that because the Republican Party is a bit different. The Republican Party works towards the past and not the future. They work towards this notion that we're going to return America to some sort of nostalgic paradise that never really existed. They work on that sort of Rust Belt small town mentality. Like, oh, that's what made Make America Great Again such a perfect slogan, because it entirely encapsulated what the mentality of the small town, the middle class, not middle class, but the working class, this rural voter is, that things have changed for the worst. Because my pockets are, there's no food on my table, and I want to go back to the way things were, even though the things back then were not that great. And there's this imagined past that the Republicans draw on, while Democrats are constantly telling people that, oh, things are getting better. The Democrats make their money by pretending that they're winning, and the Republicans make their money by pretending like they're losing. And that is the difference there. The Republicans work on this sort of notion of inherent grievance that you're constantly under assault. You're constantly under assault from the minorities, the women, whatever. While the Democrats work on this sort of we're winning. Like we're winning all of these battles. Like we're winning all of these Pyrrhic victories. Oh, who cares if if like we've lost record numbers of seats? Obama is so cool. He's so smart. He's hip. He's with it. And then the Democratic elite, they fall for this. It's and they were so surprised when Clinton lost. And in hindsight, I can't understand how you could be that surprised. And
because they
rather rather being that like, if you were that surprised, it shows that you're unqualified to comment on it, to be giving commentary on it, because it's not that surprising if you've been paying attention to anything outside of yourself. It's like it's frustrating because they pretend like they know everything.
Who is if the Democratic Party was the person, it would be one of those, it would be one of those Silicon Valley yuppie, blonde hair, blue eyed, I think I'm so great kind of people that are going in the gentrifying neighborhoods of color and saying, well, F you guys, I can afford it, and I think it's going to be a great place for my new coffee shop. That's who the Democratic Party is. If the Democratic Party was a person. But we have to realize,
the neighborhood. They improved the neighborhood. They got rid of all the people of color. But go ahead.
Well, that's exactly, like, that is what's happening. That's what this...
Sure is light around here.
Except for the service staff.
Idea.
They kept enough for service staff in the area, but they still commute 20 minutes.
I was going to say, they don't even commute a good 20. You got to commute an hour.
Yeah.
Let's look at Seattle. Seattle is a prime example of if the Democratic Party had its way. The entire U.S. would become the city of Seattle, where it's impossible to rent an apartment unless you are literally a software engineer or working for Amazon or a mechanical engineer for Boeing. You cannot afford to live in the largest city in the state of Washington. They're actually even moving it down further. Now, where I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, a majority black city that holds Joint Base Lewis McChord, that has historically been really quite honestly ethnically diverse, is now losing that because instead of catering to the people that are there, catering to the families that have been long suffering, who have been ignored by a largely Democratic state, especially in our city council, our county councils, our state representative and state senator in Tacoma have all been Democrats. They all ignore us. Crime is rampant. The whole schools are falling apart. They've just now started going and building new ones. But guess what? It doesn't matter if I have a new school and there's 50 kids in a classroom in the 3rd grade. That's not how kids are going to learn. But there's this idea that if we tear old buildings down and we build new ones, well, progress, guys. Things are better. You know what? Nowadays, it's not socially acceptable for someone to call you a racial slur, but guess what? It still happens. That's not going to put food on my table. But another issue, and I think the larger issue here, is that in the United States, both parties fall on the ideological right. There's no true liberal party in the United States of America like you oftentimes see in Europe, where you have people that are actually on the left-hand side of the spectrum and not just capitalism light, not just this, person of color putting a face on these same policies that have screwed poor people since the inception of capitalism. Guess what, white people? You guys were poor in the 1950s too. Going back to the 50s will not suddenly make you a rich white ad exec. This is not Mad Men, folks. This is real life. You were poor then, we're poor now, and it's not a race thing. It's an economic thing. And until the poor people, until we start being able to come together and move past this BS ideological nonsense that is the Democratic and Republican parties, we're all going to continue getting screwed over regularly.
And before we move too far away from that, your previous point, I wanted to touch on about holding Democrats accountable for their failings and their mistakes. And a recent headline just came out from the AP about Chicago. The investigations report is about to come out from the feds, and basically going to show that they were systematically and frequently violating people's constitutional rights.
That's the people that we pay that's from the Obama tree.
Yeah, and this is just one of several investigations that have all found something similar and work into these negotiations. But the reason why I wanted to highlight it is because who was the mayor of Chicago?
Rahm Emanuel, who was technically from the Clinton tree, but then he was next with Obama. So I mean, it's just that whole neoliberal elitist garbage.
There's no accountability.
So I think that's important as to show you. It's like, so when we talk about we hear Hillary Clinton talking about I wanted to deal with the criminal reform and do these things, but then she's like, oh, I trust Rahm, I trust Rahm, and then like a few weeks or months afterwards, the Laquan McDonald issue comes up. And that gets exposed, and it's like, oh, so that's who you trust when you're thinking of who can deal with things like the gun violence in Chicago. Is somebody like Rahm Emanuel who's going to cover up a police shooting in order to win an election. That's what they mean when they say those things. And if we don't call them on the carpet, hold them accountable for when they do and say those things, then they're going to keep getting away with it and say, well, would you rather have Trump be mayor of Chicago?
Well, of course, like that's the thing. Like it's a deferred accountability, and it's always going to be a deferred accountability. It's always going to be, well, we can't hold them accountable now. Like it's too late. And this is the thing that occurred. I mean, you see it now with Cory Booker, with Keith Ellison, with a lot of people, where the mere presence of Trump, the mere presence of Jeff Sessions means that, well, all that lofty talk during the primaries of holding people accountable, that's going to have to wait. We can't hold people accountable now because they're fighting. They're too busy fighting Trump, and it's not really an either or thing. He didn't have to vote for the pharmaceutical bill in order to fight Trump. Like this is like the fight against Trump is largely performative. It's like it's a fight to justify his bona fides so Cory Booker can run for president in 2020 and lose. And the fact that they are using Trump and Sessions, specifically Sessions, as a tool to elevate can make a run in 2020 should a distinct prime to lose. And they don't care about Jeff Sessions getting in there, attorney general. Really, this is just another piece in their political game. Jeff Sessions is another piece in their and is another pawn in their political game to frighten you into your vote. At the end of the day, it becomes like, well, he's going to get confirmed. Probably this whole thing was for nothing. It was just so they could say, well, we tried, but the government. We tried, but the government. The Republicans rather stopped us, but we tried, and therefore, look how hard we fought for you. But unfortunately, I hate to quote Yoda, but do or do not, there is no try. Ultimately, Democrats are woefully inept at.
You're lagging out there a little bit, but I really wanted to point this out. And from throughout the entirety of Hillary's campaign, I pointed this out, that whenever she talked about what she was going to do, she was never talking about getting things done. She was talking about proposing things. I'm going to put this idea out there and let people do what they will with it. And that's exactly what she was setting up. Oh, well, we tried, they shot us down, blame them, vote against them next time.
But that's it. Like, that is the Democratic Party. That is that person who that we all know someone like the Democratic Party. We all know that person who their fault. There's always a myriad of excuses that they set up for that somehow, some way they can explain this and they get out of trouble every single time, and it does nothing but make us angrier and angrier. But that is what we've talked about already, is the fact of the matter is the Democratic Party is not a party of getting things done. The Democratic Party is the party of saying, well, I was more civil, and they wouldn't have a real conversation with me, and they threw a tantrum. So they're just children, but I'm trying to be an adult. No. There's no such thing as being an adult here. There's getting stuff done or not.
I'm sorry, no. The Democratic Party get things done.
Get what done?
They got that pharmaceutical bill blocked. they just don't get progressive. They don't get progressive things done, and that's the difference. That's the difference. Democratic Party can when they want to get things done. When Obama wanted to get things through, he got them through.
What things did he want to get through?
But what it is, it's like the Democratic Party has conditioned their base to defend them from legitimate critiques from the left. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. The Democratic Party has conditioned section of moderate to center, moderate leftists to center leftists to act as a shield between them and the far left, when the far left for being unable to get things done. Their immediate response is, well, the Republicans block them, or you can't turn. America's like a big tanker ship, and you can't just expect someone to turn it immediately.
Well, let's call these people what they are. Let's call them what they are. They are left. They're left. They're apologists. They're left-leaning capitalists. They're not actually leftists. They're left-leaning capitalists. They're more liberal capitalists. They are the social, exactly, and that is part of the issue. But they also tend to be for those of you who haven't read it, I suggest reading Dr. King's letter from a Birmingham jail. They are the white moderates in that letter. They are the people happy to sit by on the sidelines and watch everything happen to other people. They're willing to sit there and let everyone else be gotten and think, well, it's not happening to me, so it can't really be that much of a problem, and then act with shock and outrage when, guess what? The same people that have gotten everybody else are coming for you too. They are coming for the white moderate. They're coming from the left-leaning capitalists. That is who they want. You're not safe.
That's the thing, and you see that occasionally. You see that every so often you see the police state or the neoliberal policies or the capitalist policies invade that, edge out that moderate, that middle class white vote, and they're suddenly surprised by the fact they're not safe. That was one of my bigger critiques of Occupy Wall Street. It was just like, I'm gonna be honest with you, they were saying things that black people were saying for a long time, and it wasn't a problem until it started attacking middle class white people and middle class white people's children. And don't get me wrong, Street was not middle class white millennials. That's not, not middle class, but college educated white millennials who were the sons and daughters of middle class who theoretically should have the generational wealth, but that generational wealth had been eroded by a neoliberal system. A lot of it was also union workers, a lot of it was other people, but there was this big subsection of occupiers that were just like basically white millennials who were now being subject to the same act that oppressed people were being stressed through, and it became unacceptable. And frankly, Occupy was great, and I'm a big Occupy supporter, but it was a lesson that had to be learned, that there is no safety under a neoliberal system. There is no safety under this capitalist system, and there is no safety in the police state. We go back to Trump, and then it comes like, okay, well, listen, yeah, Trump is awful, but he is just, and I say this all the time, he's just an excess of the system. Neo-fascism is where neoliberalism goes once it can no longer keep its people, rather, when it can no longer assuage the mental fears of its people. It can no longer indoctrinate them with capitalism, because they can look around them and see, well, capitalism doesn't work. A study came out where the majority of millennials are now not in favor of capitalism for the first time. It's like our generation just does not believe in capitalism, because we can look around and see it does not work. And so now we look at places like Flint and Detroit.
Some of us can look around and see that it doesn't work. There are sons and daughters of rich capitalists that look around and they don't see it. They see it working.
Absolutely.
And they're constantly reinforced with the idea that they've earned it, that those people that don't have it didn't earn it and don't deserve it. And one of the things that I think is an important aspect that it seems like we're kind of touching on, and I think it speaks a bit towards how to move forward, is figuring out how to convince wealthy people that their addiction to wealth is a problem, and it's harming them and their children, and they're going to end up worse off if they perpetuate this system.
What's the union? What's the old union line? Eat the rich. Like, isn't that old union? So eat the rich. That's how you solve the problem.
I don't know how much in favor I am of trying to sit down and have a conversation with somebody who has been indoctrinated to believe that they are a winner within this. I don't know how formative that conversation would be, how effective it'd be. I think a more worthwhile type of communication, because we're talking about what is the most effective way to communicate these ideas, and it doesn't have to be a literal conversation with the rich. A good way to effectively communicate these ideas is to start a new populist party, a new new leftist populist party, and in their elite by force. Like, if they simply cannot win anymore without with the far left, then that's another form of communication. It's like, well, that's how you communicate in democracy, with my vote. Like, if I refuse to vote for a Democratic Party unless they give me something to vote for, and I'm sorry, an alternative to Trump is not something. And like,
but that's the issue. That's already happening. People by the millions are not voting in this country. I believe it's something like half of the adult population that's eligible to vote didn't vote in the last election. 90,000 plus ballots in Michigan were filled out from top to bottom, except for the presidential race. People are already saying no. The party is so swollen on excess. They are so bourgeoisie at this point that they don't care. They just simply don't give a damn about the everyday average person. And that our vote, and I've been I have long been, and those of you who watch the show and who followed us know that I'm absolutely all for people going in and trying to change the Democratic Party, trying to push them to the left by electing members of their state party that will then send their members to the DNC that are true and hardcore leftists. I think that's great. But quite frankly, the Democrats do not care about you. They do not care about me. They don't care about your kids, the kids you might have in the future, your grandkids. They don't care about any of us. They care about the wealthy donors. The wealthy donors are Republicans who don't feel that black people are inferior to them genetically. They feel we're inferior because we don't have as much money. That's how they see it.
I want to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that it's an addiction, in that, like, just like you say, when somebody's addicted and then they go out and they sell their children's stuff to go buy drugs, it's not because they don't care about their child. It's because they're addicted, and they're suffering from an illness and so on and so forth. Now, there's some personal choices that are involved in all that and so on and so forth. But
what does America give a damn about the poor? Ever.
Well, here's the thing. Here is the best description of the Democratic Party that I can think of. Or rather, the Democratic neoliberal elite. It's just like what? It's like you're a homeless black person. Democrats don't want you to die because you're black. They want you to die because you're homeless.
But that's it. Like, when has the country ever cared about the poor? Ever. In the entirety that the U.S. has existed.
I'm not arguing that it was better at some point.
They didn't care about us in the 30s and 40s.
I'm just suggesting, well, to some degree...
Roosevelt did a couple of things for old people. That was it.
When people get rowdy and they're actually concerned about the safety and security of the nation as a whole because of an upset populace, that's when things change. But and I guess to Brandon's point earlier about a party, I think a party. Hold on, real quickly. I think a party might be too far of a reach. In my personal opinion, I think it might be too much more work than there is the base and the enthusiasm to get going. I think a movement is more realistic in the aspect of without having to set up party rules and so on and so forth, and get behind individuals on the individual level. And
screw that.
And do it that way.
I want to speak to what
I'm also borrowing from the conversation that you guys had after Obama's farewell speech the other night. So
I want to speak to what you're saying. I also want to speak to what Adair is saying. And my point is this: it's just like Adair talking about people not voting, and at a certain point, you're right, Adair. So what we need to tackle is that a lot of this is simply that the way the system works now, it has indoctrinated people, has socialized people to believe that their vote is less worthwhile, that certain things are true, that they are. It has this way to changing our system don't simply exist within that system itself, but it also exists in the way that system makes us feel about the system. And both the Democrats and Republicans have done a very, very good job at making people feel as though there is nothing outside of them. Republicans get away with what they get away with because they have conditioned the voting population to believe that, well, listen, this is the only way to do things. The Democrats and Republicans are in control of the standards, or not the actual standards, but like the publicly what is the popular consensus of what the standards for being a legitimate candidate are, what it takes to be a real party. Look at all of party. We all have our problem with the Green Party. We can all recognize that the Green Party is in some way problematic. But what did you hear? The criticisms of the Green Party were all framed under the premises of what the Democrats were saying you had to have in order to be president. You had to be able to. The Democrats are standards that we hold political parties to in political operatives. They're saying, well, if you don't have 30 years in politics, well, you can't run for president. If you don't take corporate money, you can't be a legitimate DNC chair if you don't take corporate money. And they have arbitrary rules in the heads of the population. And so
here's what I would like to see though.
Okay, go.
Like I don't even mind that. Here's what I want to see. We want to enact real change. I don't even think we have to necessarily make a party of just yet. Let's take a page out of the unions and just stop doing the damn work for the wealthy elite. General strike, and I guarantee you when things come to a grinding halt because you manage to find a way to get enough people to say, you know what? We're going to come together. We're going to have a collectivist general strike. Yes, there are going to be people that need to be taken care of. And that's our responsibility as other human beings, is to take care of each other. But you really want to hit them where it hurts. You really want to start seeing change. Start hitting these wealthy elite in their pocket. Start saying, hey, guess what? Until I'm going to get paid for my labor, that I get paid a wage I can live on, you're not going to get it, and watch how quickly things change. Follow what the unions did to get to everything that they had. They fought, and people died for it.
This goes back to this goes. I agree with you. That would work. I mean, we talked about this before. Like, a strike would be great, but this goes back to my original point. I think it's not simply. So we ask people will strike. They say, well, I can't afford to. And it's like, yes, that is totally reasonable. A lot of people do not have the economic stability to afford to miss work. They don't have the kind of money saved up. As we know, the middle class in America is very precarious. Most people can't afford to miss 1 or 2 paychecks. These things are also just barriers in their head. A lot of resistance to striking, the resistance to boycotting, the resistance to like these methods of protest are sort of whipped out of us, rather, for lack of a better word, by the media, by the Democratic establishment, by all these things. And so now we have a populace that has been believe that only certain types of resistance are necessary. Look at when people try to protest and block a bridge. Oh, Martin Luther King Jr. wouldn't do that. I guess he would.
Yes, he did.
Yeah,
like he literally did.
So,
yeah,
he did do it. So this becomes a larger conversation about not only structural barriers, but the way structural barriers in the system erect barriers in our mind that restrict our choices, that restrict our agency, and the ways in which we can system into basically, for lack of a better word, the elite have constructed in our minds, because that is what it is. I mean, so we talk about there was between I hate to do this, but there was a great debate between an anarchist anthropologist and Thomas Piketty, the progressive economist, and he talks about what it takes for this uprising. He brings up Marx. He says, well, Marx. He feels that Marx was more optimistic than he was, because Marx basically felt that at some point, we'll reach a tipping point and everyone will just wake up. But what Marx did not, account for was that we have this mass media apparatus that basically acts as one arm of neoliberalism and capitalism that does nothing else but restrict our choices and feed us propaganda that tells us that certain actions are not only to society but to ourselves. And look at Vox. Vox at the end of 2016, all Vox put out was 1,000 articles about why 2016 was great. So my point is this: it's just before there can be an uprising in the streets, we have to uprise in our own head. We have to break down these barriers that exist in our heads, but that's so difficult because the system is designed to construct them.
But it doesn't have to be an uprising all at once, and I think that's one of the things that people have to realize.
This is also one of the reasons I also argue generational change is a more realistic goal, but I'm all for doing everything as fast as we can. Go ahead, there.
But that's the thing, is that we take small personal steps in our lives all the time. Personally, I refuse to shop at Walmart. I do not shop at Walmart, and I'm a broke college student who lives off financial aid. I refuse to go. It is the cheapest option anywhere, and I do not go. I will make my dollar stretch longer if I have to, than feed into that monument to excess greed and human suffering that is Walmart. I will not do it. And we are able to do these things in our own lives. We are also able to come together as communities, because that is what we have to do. We rely too much on this idea. There's a blind worship. It's a religious fervor to rely on your elected figureheads, to rely on someone like Bernie Sanders with the bill that he sponsored. People in my Facebook were like, but Bernie said it was good. Bernie said to do it, so how can anybody ever disagree with Bernie? You can disagree with Bernie. Now, in this case, the bill was absolutely great, and you should have passed it, but you can disagree with Bernie. There's this garbage idea that we have to have a figurehead. You do not have to worship these people. Your community is who is going to be there for you at the end of the day. The people you live next to, you should get to know them, and you start working together, because all it takes is that one small action of protest to snowball into something much bigger than itself.
And I think it's going to
Absolutely.
take
And I
a
mean,
lot of, or just quickly, it's going to take a lot of work in order to get people on the same page as far as being able to understand how we can how we can identify when people make mistakes or say things, do things wrong, whether it's Bernie or anybody else, and then what qualifies as something that means that this person can't be trusted. We cannot work with this person until they redeem themselves in some way, and what qualifies as we have to take them at their word and presume that this was an honest mistake, and various other lines that come across in the actions and so on and so forth. So, for instance, the Democrats that supported this bill, at least on its face, haven't personally read everything in depth, but from the cursory analysis that I've been seeing, it shows, it seems to be, like you said, a perfectly fine bill. That it doesn't seem like the reasoning that they're putting forth right away for opposing it makes any sense, and that leads me to believe that they're not being honest about why they're opposing it, and so on and so forth. But we got about 4 minutes left, so
we do.
go ahead and
Well, I mean,
get us
yeah.
wrapped up shortly, Brandon.
Yeah, just to comment on that real quick. At a certain point, it doesn't make a difference what's in the heart of Cory Booker and why he voted against it. Whether he truly believes that there was no safety regulations in that bill, he didn't read it, or he's believing what the big pharma told him is irrelevant to me. This comes down to, at a certain point, I'm worried about my politicians being ineffective, not whether their heart's in the right place. Ideally, their hearts would be in the right place and they would be effective. But if I had to choose one or the other, if I had to choose someone who was only being effective because I was, holding their feet to the fire and they didn't believe anything I believed in at a personal level, I would choose that person. Because when we're talking about politics and policy, about things that affect people's lives, fighting and failing is not rather a cycle of fighting and failing. A trend in that is not an acceptable record for a politician. Like I always fight for the right thing. I always stand on the right side. It's like, okay, well, do you get the things done? No. Okay, well then you're gone. I'm sorry. It's like then we need someone who can get the things done. Like I would rather get something. I would not something, but I would rather have someone who. Because let's be honest, a lot of times they do like Adair says, they succumb to a need to compromise. They preemptively compromise before it's even necessary. And as far as I think that people were very quick to call Donald Trump a strong man. I'm a strong man. But we have our own strong men on the left. Idols to get rid of and think outside of. And Bernie Sanders has started to become very problematic, not in his personal policies, not in his personal philosophy. Like I still like him generally pretty well, but at this point he's enabling the Democratic Party. Like he's getting out there and advocating for them while at the same time they're voting against this bill. And even if he shames them publicly on his Twitter account, he's not going to stop advocating for them. Like I want him to come out and say, you know what? After I handle Trump, I'm going to handle Booker too.
Yep.
That's what our revolution is about. After we get rid of, after we resist, or rather after we fight Trump, we're going to primary Booker. Yep. Because Booker has proven that he's not an ally. Like the Democratic Party needs to start drawing hard lines in the sand and say, if you cross these lines, we're done with you. Like we're going to primary you. You're out. Putting a D by your name is not enough. But thank you for joining me at Project Sanity. My name is Brandon Sutton. Rest of you sign off. You got 30 seconds apiece.
Dare Schmidt. Please feel free to follow me on Twitter. I'd love to have more conversations with you folks there. And please believe the rants will continue, probably in video format.
Yeah. All right. Thank everybody for watching. If you're watching on Project Sanity from projectsanity.org, thank you. If you're watching on the Benjamin Dixon channel, please check out the projectsanity.org and get subscribed. Thank you to the Progressive Army, the Benjamin Dixon channel channel, and to Brandon and Dare. You guys are great. Dare, you were really on fire today, I think. You can follow me on Twitter down here at this Twitter address here, Progressive Green. Thank you all again, and make sure to stay tuned for the Progressive Army coverage of the inauguration. It should be pretty good. So, and if you can, there's a GoFundMe to get some of our folks down there. If you can contribute, go ahead and check out either Anoa's timeline or various timelines, and you'll be able to find it. So thanks again, and good night, and good luck.